Should Metroidvanias be capitalized?
It's a good. That's actually my first question this week. Question one. Merry Chris Remo! This is episode 369 of Insert Credit, a holiday spectacular with our very own Carol of the Buzzers. I'm Alex Jaffe, and my favorite holiday story is Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins, which was a picture book that we read every year in the Jaffe house growing up, of this sort of clever trickster figure in the shtetl named Herschel, who had to rid the town that he was visiting of goblins by tricking them into lighting the menorah for him.
That's quite a task.
Yeah, it was not easy, but he pulled it off. And I had a lot of respect for Herschel, my favorite holiday hero.
Wow. I'm Frank Cifaldi, and it's my favorite Christmas story, right?
Your favorite holiday story, yes.
Holiday story, right. Sorry, I'm just extremely Christian. So.
Oh, right.
I think it's got to be my boy Scrooge, man. Like I think learning to be a better person by having ghosts hold up a mirror to you is it's a pretty good little story. I like that.
O.G. Dickens style. Do you have a favorite version of A Christmas Carol?
I don't know. They're all just kind of like cool remixes of each other. Probably that Bill Murray one.
Scrooge.
Oh, yeah.
Scrooge. My husband loves Scrooge.
I just bought the 4K.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And the Muppets one is very good as well.
I'm Ash Parrish, and my favorite holiday story is Die Hard. No, sorry.
Boo.
Yeah, exactly. Bad joke. I don't know. I don't really have one per se. I really enjoy Charlie Brown Christmas not because of anything that's going on screen, but just because I love the Vince Guaraldi music. Mm-hmm. And I also really enjoy, do you guys remember that really old animated short? I think it was on Sesame Street, A Snowy Day, where the little black boy is like dressed up in this like red onesie jumper, and he's like out in the city, like enjoying the snow day.
Oh yeah, I do remember this.
I really like that. I also actually really like, is that A Christmas Story? The guy with the BB gun?
Yes, A Christmas Story. The Gene Shepard thing.
I only really like that because it was one of like the only things or stories that I had ever seen that takes place in the exact town where I grew up in Indiana. Like even though it was shot in Cleveland. So yeah, or at least the Christmas Story house is in Cleveland.
Well, I'm Brandon Sheffield. I was going to say Scrooged because I bought it on that 4K. But I got to choose something else. Okay, this is very silly. I like the Grinch. Mm-hmm. You know, the Grinch is cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
But people have been talking about Elf like since it came out and how it's great and amazing and hilarious. And I finally watched it. And it's pretty funny. It's really stupid.
It's okay.
And so it's not my favorite, but since A Christmas Carol is taken, I'm just going to go with Elf. Going with Elf.
I have an irrational hatred for Elf because...
Same. Jesus.
Well, yours sounds more rational than mine based on invoking the Lord's name, just that.
Sorry.
I don't appreciate it as a Christian.
What Ash doesn't like is the lack of Jesus in Elf.
Don't put that on me.
At the time, honestly, just kind of out of boredom, I just had time. I took a night job at a video store. I was like, I don't know, I've never worked retail. What's that like? And one of the first things that came out at that time on DVD, I guess it would have been, was Elf. And I just had to restock it all the time. And I just like came to hate What's-His-Face's expression on the cover of that movie.
Yeah, you had to keep putting Elf on the shelf.
You beat me. Oh, God damn it. I'm so mad. I was racking it up.
Well,
too obvious.
I had to put elves on the shelves, in fact.
Ash, why do you hate Elf?
I've never liked that obnoxious form of humor that he is famous for. I can't remember the name of that actor, and
Will
I don't
Ferrell,
care
is that
to.
his name?
Yeah. I have never appreciated that humor. It's not funny to me. It's just so stupid. But most of the people around me love that movie, especially my husband, and it's just like nails on a chalkboard. I can't stand it.
Well, we've got a guest this week that I'd like to introduce. Joining us here on Insert Credit.
What does he hate?
Let's find out what video game designer, composer, podcaster, and crossword puzzle celebrity Chris Remo likes about Christmas specials. What's your favorite holiday story, Chris?
It's a good question. I think I would also choose on musical grounds because I think that's the only axis on which I can kind of muster enough of a sort of opinion on this. And Charlie Brown Christmas, absolute top-notch choice. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, top-notch music. Thurl Ravenscroft. Yes. Brilliant performance of that song. But since those have already been mentioned, I will mention Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker.
I was going to say, how you feel about that Nutcracker suite?
I feel wonderfully about it. I actually go to see it performed every year, which happened last night. So I've just seen a performance of The Nutcracker by the English National Ballet.
Oh, that's the one to see.
It's pretty good. It is, my top tier Nutcracker staging is still the one performed by the San Francisco Ballet. Actually, it's an absolutely incredible staging. So if you have the opportunity to see that, you should. It's really,
I saw that
good.
when I was a child.
It's great.
And I don't remember what I thought because I was a child, but I bet it was real cool. Many nuts were cracked.
Yep, they do crack a few nuts, yeah.
A lot of real creepy rat costumes I appreciate.
Can't make something without cracking a few nuts. What is it that you can't make without cracking nuts?
Omelet.
Yeah, that's right. Can't make an omelet without cracking a few nuts.
That's what they say. I've got some questions for us today. Here's my first one. What's the right way to modulate crossword puzzle difficulty?
This is a question for me, obviously.
Yeah.
Time to check my email.
What do you mean when you say what's the best way to modulate it? I'm just trying to get a beat on
mean, it's well-known crossword puzzle wisdom that different days of the week, particularly with the New York Times, have different difficulties of a crossword puzzle. But how do you decide what's an easy clue and what's a medium clue?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's actually incredibly difficult. And I do, as you sort of implied, I do a series each day in which I solve the New York Times crossword of that day. And one of the things that I commonly remark is that difficulty of crosswords is incredibly subjective and very much a product of an individual person's domain of knowledge. The thing that's strange about crosswords relative to, the kind of video games that you might discuss in more of a, I don't know, the sense that you ordinarily would on this show, and when you talk about game design, is that they're basically sort of quizzes inside of a game format. And so it's just kind of general knowledge in a way. So one of the things about that I've noticed is that the outlet that the crossword is published in has a huge impact on this as well. I mean, the New York Times, I would say, really strives for a kind of middle of the road kind of attitude. I would say they try and roughly balance kind of pop culture and history and sort of general vocabulary roughly evenly, basically, whereas certainly a lot of crosswords here in the UK where I live have a much higher sort of vocabulary floor and sort of arcane knowledge floor, but have very, very, very little pop culture.
Plus a lot more U's.
They do have more U's, yes.
Got more U's in there.
The crosswords are slightly larger grids. Compensated
to accommodate
on average.
the U's.
Exactly,
so would you say then that Will Shortz is a crossword centrist?
I would definitely say that, yes.
Okay.
I would say actually that applies in many ways in which you might, I would say that the sort of emotional valence of the term centrist can be extended, more broadly to the New York Times Will Shortz style.
He's more like a Will Mediums.
I just wanted to show off that I know the name of the crossword editor.
Yeah.
That's the extent of my crossword.
He is not currently the crossword editor.
Oh.
Because he had a stroke in February and
I retract my blasted.
He's not technically retired. He is not technically retired, but he has not edited a crossword since about March.
I do think the idea of general knowledge is kind of interesting because when you look at Jeopardy, for example, Jeopardy is theoretically a general knowledge show. And then when you get to Celebrity Jeopardy, you can see the degree to which that generality can be generalized further.
Yes, that is true.
Because when it's Celebrity Jeopardy, I know the answers, I know 75% of the things that are on there.
And the thing is that you can basically observe that in a given week in the New York Times crossword, because on Monday, it will be that very general kind of general knowledge, whereas on Saturday, it'll get pretty arcane. So you can see how broad that the idea of general knowledge is, even just in a single week.
So if the difficulty ramps from Monday to Saturday, What is Sunday just like a gimmick puzzle? Is that a one-off?
No. Thursday is more of a gimmick puzzle. Thursday is when you get a really wacky theme, usually where you might have multiple letters in single cells and things like that. Sunday is just a much larger puzzle, and it's usually roughly a Wednesday level difficulty, in my opinion. But it's so big that it usually takes like 2 to 3 times as long as it ordinarily would of that difficulty level.
I realize
more time.
that specific video game knowledge is probably what this always sounds like to anybody that's peeking in, but it's more of a Wednesday difficulty is a very funny.
I was going to say, like, absolutely. How do the days of the week rank in difficulty levels? Yep. So Wednesday is the hardest day and not Monday?
No, Monday's the hardest, Saturday's the toughest.
But Thursday's the weirdest, and Wednesday's the whatest? I forget.
Wednesday's just middle of the road.
It's medium. It's the centrist.
That's Will Short's day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Man, what kind of clues do you think like people struggle the most with? Like, are there certain kinds of knowledge? Are there certain areas of knowledge?
People struggle with whatever they don't know. I mean, the funny thing about crosswords, I have learned to have very few opinions about crossword difficulty at this point because I've just done so many of them that I don't really like. If a crossword's difficult, I don't take it as a personal offense against me. But I think a lot of people, when they're sort of trying to get into crosswords, they do, because to every individual person, the thing that you don't know feels like ridiculous, and the thing that you do know feels obvious. And in fact, I think this is something that, as a game designer, I'm talking not about crosswords here, but about video game design. This is just a general thing that I think is valuable to keep in mind. That just because you don't happen to know something, it doesn't mean it's weird or obscure. And just because you do know something, it doesn't mean it's obvious or it should be taken for granted. Yeah. And when you're designing a video game, you have to think about. I mean, I think that's important for life in general. I don't think video games are the most important application of that principle, but it is important to bear in mind in video game design because you spend all this time making a complicated system, and then it can be very easy to take it for granted that the people on the other end of the screen will just be able to think through it the same way you did, and obviously that's not true. And I think when people who don't have a job that causes them to need to think about that often, try and solve a difficult crossword and then encounter things they don't know, I think a very frequent default response can be, why would anyone put this? This doesn't make, no one knows this. Why would you put that in the thing? But it's, it's just because you maybe haven't encountered that word before, or that fact or whatever.
Meanwhile, has everyone here? Oh, shoot.
Yeah, sorry, we got to move on. Here's my next topic. I want to talk about the way that instruments are used in video game soundtracks. What particular moods or vibes in game soundtracks are most closely associated with specific instrumentation?
The vibrato is usually associated with the emotion of British, in my experience.
That means
it's true.
I mean, if you've got a snow level, Christmas themed or not, you better get those damn sleigh bells out.
That's true.
Yeah, or some sort of or a tubular bell, something that's very like boing is good too. If you want to indicate school, there's a certain type of chime that you require.
Yeah,
I would say. But more generally, I think something that bugs me is the trope of it's time for rock guitars because there's action happening. I don't know why. Maybe it's just through overuse, but that one really it kind of grates on me, especially if that's like the only time a guitar comes in. It's like, where? It's like, now we're doing a solo. It's just, I don't know. It bugs me.
Every instance of action happening should be denoted with a Japanese monk chanting.
Oh, across the board.
We're in Metaphor Fantasia land.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Like every game's credits should have just a section of like monk chorus.
Absolutely. Let's bring Homer back. Let's bring back the Greek tragedies.
Yeah, video games need more Greek choruses.
There's this thing that's happening, but this applies to film soundtracks as well. But I would say, if anything, it's even become more of a trope in game soundtracks that drives me absolutely bonkers. Which is, I don't know what the specific instruments are, but it gets generically referred to as tribal drums. There's this, it's like these big booming drums that people put behind big orchestral scores, meant as a shortcut for like, make this epic. You put these big booming drums behind an orchestra, and I find it so obnoxious. And it's one of my least favorite soundtrack trends of the last 20 years.
Something that I've really enjoyed is when people mess with their own themes a bit. Like in Fez, when you get into the glitchy area and then the music is like stranger and fuzzier and fading in and out, and it felt like you went somewhere else, even though essentially the same instruments are being used, but they're kind of being narrowed and squished and pushed around. I think that kind of stuff is neat. And for me, it's kind of neat to see synthesizer trends come and go in video games. Like, I had someone talking to me a while ago about how, so the Super Nintendo sound chip could do samples, and so it could play basically any kind of music.
I think it only does samples.
Yeah. And the Genesis people were like, but it didn't sound like real music. I don't know why people liked it so much. But my reaction was, did you listen to any like New Jack Swing or R&B of the mid to late 80s? Because they were all using Roland synthesizers that had basically that sound font. So it did sound like popular music of the era, depending on what kind of music you listened to. And nowadays you got like, if the 80s are present, someone's going to try to do a John Carpenter or some sort of a synth wavy thing. And that can get obnoxious, but sometimes it can actually be cool. It's just interesting to see the kind of trends come and go. In Demon School, we're trying to go from more of a early mid 70s, more analog synthesizer kind of a sound. And something I've found interesting about that is when people play it that are younger, they don't have a frame of reference for it. Because like other games we've had, they'll be like, oh, it sounds like this, or it's just like that. And with this, they're like, how did you come up with this sound? And it's like, well, it's just all the Italian horror films mashed up into one. But if you haven't listened to that, then it sounds like something completely unfamiliar, which is neat and weird.
But you still got those school bells in there, right?
Dong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ding dong bing bong, to quote Danganronpa.
Yeah, that's our time, I believe. Back when Wordle was super popular.
It's still popular.
My
mom plays it every day.
But it wasn't dominating the cultural conversation the way it was a little while ago. Specifically back then, and it's not something we see as much of now, we started seeing all these spin-offs and like rule-twisted, complicated versions of Wordle made by third parties. Did any of those have any merit?
I never liked any of them particularly, or at least I shouldn't say didn't like, but none of them really stuck. Wordle's the only one I felt that Wordle feels like elemental. It feels like a game design that was discovered almost rather than invented, which is
like Tetris.
Obviously not true, but it feels that way. You know, the other ones feel like a thing that's kind of like what Wordle is.
Yeah, I think that when you get something that's simple and pure, and then you try to layer and add.
Clean, do you mean? Simple and clean, yeah. Then when you add a bunch of junk on it, it feels like something that a bunch of junk got added to. I had a really good friend who got deep into the Wordle and the Wordle clone hole, and she would do like maybe 4 or 5 different Wordle clones a day. And one of them that I thought was really cool more than anything else was the one that played snippets of video game music, and you had to guess what it was. And I never played it. I'm not a Wordle person at all. I think that was like the best example of a Wordle clone done correctly.
Sure. Yeah, it's got having audio adds a whole different element to it, kind of makes it a different thing.
Yeah. What are your experiences with word games, regular panelists? Did you ever have one that you were really into?
Probably, but I can't think of it now, of course, because we're on the spot.
I mean, I'll just admit that absolutely not. I've never been a word puzzle guy at all. I like action. I like hitting stuff.
I liked Mad Libs, which is not, it's like the simplest perhaps form of a word puzzle, but
if that counts, Mad Libs rule. Yeah.
But
it does not.
Mad Libs actually did start me thinking about like branching path narrative, believe it or not, because
for sure,
not only does everybody do it differently, simple changes lead to different outcomes in a somewhat remarkable way that will be funny to your friends. So, I don't know. I maybe I'm going to defend my liking of Mad Libs as a youth.
I think that's fair.
I think Mad Libs is basically Dungeons & Dragons.
You know?
Yeah.
I want to argue with that.
It's a word dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
I can't think of any word games specifically, and I'll probably think of several once this podcast is over, but I did make up a word game that I would just play with myself.
Ooh,
like whenever I would get bored, I would like, I don't know if it was reading, or I would make up some kind of phrase or something in my head, and I would draw like a straight line for every word. And then every new word would be like a different intersection. And I would see like, it almost looked like fractals, but not, that detailed, like the mathematical fractals, when I was done with like a specific passage or something like that. And I used to do that all the time when I was a kid, and I don't know why. And I've never known anybody else to do that. And it was just a game that I would play with myself.
I would love to see that.
I'd like to see this illustrated.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Please do one.
I can do that. I will
Please do
that.
one.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes, post it up on the forums. I don't know. Does 20 questions count as a word game?
You use words in it, but I don't know.
It's not a word game.
I don't think that's a word game. I do sort of like the word game where you have to quickly say the next word starting with the last letter of the prior word. It's kind of fun to do like in a car situation or whatever.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten as deep into that sort of thing because I tend with puzzles to go more for pattern recognition because I'm doing it more for relaxing than for working out my brain, I guess.
What is the best of those, that sort of New York Times cluster apart from the crosswords? Like, I know there's spelling bee, there's categories.
My mom likes
people
that
crazy.
spelling bee one. That's the one with the hexagon. You got to do all the little what's-its.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to make as many words as possible out of that.
Yeah, that one's kind of fun. I enjoyed it. I play it whenever my mom comes to visit. She's like, "Can you find any more words?" And then I find a couple more words.
Yeah, I've had that experience with my mom.
Connections is like the most infuriating one, where you have to, that's what it's called, right? Where you have to you have this group of words, you have to come up with how they're all related. The way that sometimes the New York Times associates these words are the most esoteric, inscrutable categorization systems that a normal human would never be able to perceive at all, even if you gave them a million years and all the computing power in the world. It just doesn't make sense to me. How am I supposed to guess what you're thinking? I don't like the premise of that.
Isn't that what crossword puzzles are too? It's about guessing what the writer's thinking.
That's you get a more discreet hint with that. A 4-letter word that means such and such. Whereas with connections, you get just straight up 4 words and you're supposed to figure out how they fit. And it's apple and chicken soup and something else. And and then you realize later, no, not even that. They all have dextrose as their main sugar component or some bullshit.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Maybe my favorite word game, actually, because it's nice to feel empowered and stuff, is when a family member, this happened more in my youth because I don't live near my family members, but when they would be doing a crossword puzzle or something, and there would be a video game or a music question, and they would just turn to me and be like, well, please do this one. Please use your expertise, because then you get to feel like a smarty.
Oh, I know a good word game. Wheel of Fortune.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hot one. A lot of funny scenarios come out of that, too.
That is the end of this topic.
Mad Libs is what happens when the snowflakes get activated.
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
No problem.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. Here's my next question. If I haven't been convinced to get into VR by now, am I beyond reach?
Yes.
Probably.
I think so. I feel like I'm beyond reach.
Yeah.
And I haven't been convinced. I just look at it and I think, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I keep hearing really cool things about the Arkham video game that just came out on VR, but I couldn't be bothered to care about it, despite it being the thing I care about. I
continue to think that I don't want it in my house. I just don't like things in my house. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, same.
But I think I've said this on the show before. I kind of have this fantasy of a cheap Airbnb that just has Half-Life Alyx on the highest spec thing and just leave me alone. I would just go spend a day doing that. I continue to like the technology in theory. I've had friends just put a VR head thing on me and have me play their game. And it's oh, it's pretty cool. I like this as an experience, but I don't know how to fit this into my life, into my home, my sacred palace.
Which I guess is how a lot of people feel about video games in general.
Well,
Maybe.
no, it's different because
it is different.
VR occupies the same space as those huge ass Japanese cabinets that are for rhythm games. They're really cool and they're fun to play. And if you're a real sick freak, you can put one in your house. But honestly, they're best experienced somewhere else, like under a special circumstance, like going to an anime convention or something like that. It's just like, it's too bespoke for it to be generally accessible or something that the general public not should have, but like, it's too much. It's too bespoke. There's nothing really you have to have or have to experience with VR. Same with those rhythm games. They're fucking fun. And if I had all the money and space in the world, I would have one. But if you're just like an average consumer, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I just have a hard time opting into being blinded in an environment that's not completely safe.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know, I'm going to like step on a cat or something, you know?
Right.
Some of them now do have like, you know, you put on the headset and then they have forward facing cameras and now you're still in your space.
Well, that sounds lame.
Yeah. Well, that's how the AR stuff is gonna be working. I've been interested to just watch how it goes from the perspective of various developers working on stuff, and I will say that every developer I know who was working on a VR game is not anymore, except for one who's just going along chose that niche and is just making indie games in there. It's such a weird market because there are millions of headsets out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there can be games that get really wide adoption among those people that have the headset that are really interested in it because there's not enough stuff coming out for them. And so if something's pretty decent, then a bunch of them will buy it. But how much are those people using those headsets? How many games do they really want? Do they just want
Beat Saber?
Beat Saber and Half-Life Alyx? Maybe. It's a very curious situation. And if not for Oculus and Sony, I don't think VR would continue to be around. They're just pumping the money into it, but they are still pumping the money into it. Sony will probably stop pretty soon, I think, but Oculus will not stop, and they're determined to make it a thing. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what shape that's going to take if they keep doing it. You know?
Well, I suspect that VR. I might be wrong, and please correct me if I am, if we know, but I suspect VR has what I'd call the Myst problem, which is that a lot of people bought Myst when it came out to show off the fact that they had a CD-ROM and that was new technology, but they did not then become adopters of additional CD-ROM games. They just got the one thing that justified their technology purchase and then did not graduate to anything else. And I suspect that's probably true of a lot of there are literally millions of VR headsets. There's no way that like half of those are continued customers. You know what I mean? They probably bought like a game to show off and then that was it. And I suspect that there's not much of a continued marketing past the gee whiz first time usage of the thing.
My suspicion is that, and I don't have anything to back this up, is that since the Quest 3 did sell 20-something million units, I don't know the exact number, but it was a lot of them, that people are graduating to new headsets, but I don't know that the tie ratio of game purchase is very high.
Well, they're probably all in the metaverse.
We're almost out of time, but I really want to hear Chris's perspective on this, considering that like you have been a VR game developer, and this must be something that you have dealt with a lot.
I feel like he's maybe specifically not talking about this on purpose. That was my guess.
I mean, I'm not talking about it on purpose. When you say dealt with it a lot, you would dealt with what? Just sort of generally thinking about VR or?
Yeah, when you're working on a VR game, you must be aware of what the cultural opinion of VR is and like what niche it occupies.
I mean, I suppose so, but that doesn't necessarily have much of an effect on what you're doing. You know, I mean, I was just trying to help make the game be the best it could. I mean, the game in question being Half-Life Alyx, in case that's ambiguous. But I mean, it felt very different to make a game in VR, I have to say, because you can only you make the thing on a normal computer the normal way, but then you play it in this fundamentally different environment, and that's something that's just different to how it has. That's a sort of like loop of actually making a thing that's different to what I've experienced before. I suppose that it is strange knowing, even working on something as big as Half-Life, which is that's the biggest series I've ever worked on. And you are conscious of the fact that making it, you're going to be selling it to a smaller subset of people than you would otherwise be. In theory, it's like, well, this is the kind of biggest potential audience I've ever sort of helped address. Mm-hmm. But obviously that's different when it's VR, because you're making things for a self-selecting subgroup. And so then you have to think about all these things like, well, people have really strong opinions about, things that I had never thought about before, because to be totally honest, I wasn't very familiar with VR before I worked on that game. And people have very strong opinions about, walking continuously versus walking in little bursts of teleport in a first-person game, and all these things that you have to think about really hard, because you're trying to make the best game you can, obviously, but also you're trying, that's modulated by the fact that you're also trying to make a game that the people who have bought into this particular technology, like, what's the way that they actually want to interface it. So it's like, okay, well, let's support both of these. Well, is one of them the sort of more native version of the game? Because those are really different ways to interact with a first-person environment. You could design two different games with those two different systems, a kind of continuous, analog stick style movement versus little point and click jumps. That might really change fundamental decisions you make about how to interact with things or the scale of spaces. But, having to support both of those means like that introduces this additional dimension of game design that applies to really fundamental decisions. And then, so there are a lot of things like that were, it was a whole different axis of problems than I had personally encountered before. But that's on top of all the other things you already have to. It's not like it removed any of the other kinds of things.
Yeah, just added complexity.
Yeah, for sure.
Was it important to make it feel like a Half-Life game?
Yeah, I think it was for sure. Yeah, and again, that's really difficult, because to me, one of the things that is really a hallmark, I guess, of the Half-Life series, going back to the first game, is completely continuous sort of experience and input. So
right.
from the first frame of the first Half-Life game, you never leave that perspective, and the game never stops accepting your input, essentially. It's much more extreme than most video games. In a lot of video games, you're interrupted with kind of full camera takeovers of cinematics and things like that. And that there are times where the camera is very briefly taken over in Half-Life for sort of experiential reasons, but rarely for more than, like a second or two at a time, and never to cut your perspective. And so you can play Half-Life Alyx like that, but you can also play it in this other way that's different. And so, it does introduce an idea of like, well, is that like fundamental to Half-Life, or is that a sort of contributing design element to Half-Life? Like, to what extent, do you sort of preserve the thing that this series feels like with some of these other parameters? It's you do think about that a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew this, but people have really strong opinions about Half-Life. I don't know if you were.
Oh, do they?
In any way aware of that?
Yeah, I was. I think I was 100% unaware of until I worked at Valve. I don't work at Valve full time anymore, but when I did, a thing that I was 100% unaware of until I did was that there's an entire like cottage industry of people who just sort of cover Half-Life, or not Half-Life, but Valve in general, including Half-Life, and like report on things that they've like dug up from game code and all these
Looking
things.
For
I had
threes.
no idea that was a whole thing, that like a not insignificant number of people, derive sort of income and audience from online. So yeah, people they care a lot.
And just a small correction, it's the Quest 2 that sold 20 million. The 3 has not gotten there.
Okay. Hold your comments. We're going to reflect on that as we go into the break. The following ad supports the Insert Credit podcast, but is not necessarily endorsed by its individual members. This is the Insert Credit Quick Break. I'm Alex Jaffe, and this week's Insert Credit is sponsored by Charles Greenberg. Charles Greenberg is a musician and composer on tracks like this one with a passion for games, looking for new, cool projects. If you're looking for a musician with a vast knowledge of older game systems who can bring that experience to your project with an emphasis on feelings over technicalities, Charles is ready to bring your vision to life. Do you feel like hiring a musician is outside of your price range? You may be surprised. Check out charles-greenberg.com to figure out a scope and budget that makes sense for you. You can also email directly at charles.greenberg1@gmail.com. Want your project to get weirder? Charles will get you there. If you'd like to sponsor an episode of Insert Credit with your own advertisement or personal message, reach out to us at show@insertcredit.com. Welcome back to Insert Credit. It's time to go swimming in the question hole. Every single week, I take a question submitted to us by the patrons at patreon.com/insertcredit, where those who kick us a few dollars a month get the opportunity to send us their questions, monthly bonus episodes, and episodes of the regular show at various levels of volume.
I thought the regular show was canceled.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
He means Insert Credit regular show, not the cartoon.
Yes, our regular show. And I hear the regular show is coming back, actually.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah,
That's news to me.
they're reviving it.
I never watched it.
Never
watched it.
It's back and as regular as ever.
Nice.
This week's question comes from Death Strandicoot, who asks, Funko Pop recently took down itch.io. What are some other interesting company interactions or rivalries in gaming?
Well, that wasn't a rivalry. That was just something incredibly stupid happening.
Wait, remind me what happened, even though I should know because I'm the journalist.
So the Funko Pop company, I think it wasn't Funko Pop directly, but the like overarching brand employed some sort of an AI tool to do takedowns of infringing property. And so they submitted something about a game that was on itch.io to itch's domain owner. Then they just instantly shut it down without any question. They shut down itch entirely at the domain level and had no appeals process. Eventually it did get solved after like almost a day, but that was a very of our times sort of a thing to happen where Funko Pop can use AI to shut down an entire indie game selling marketplace.
That seems less like on the AI and more like on the domain for like not exercising discretion. Like usually you don't nuke an entire website based on one claim for one game.
Yeah, and also you could maybe like if they looked at the traffic generated by itch, I can't imagine that it's on the lower end of the domains that they manage. So like there should be a little bit of benefit of the doubt there and a little conversation to have, but it did not.
Algorithms are going to kill us all.
Yeah, it's true. So other good, but other bitter rivalries, like
interesting company interactions with other companies is kind of how I took it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a time a company has stepped on another company's toes in just a weird way, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only ones that I can think of right now are like dumb little dramas. Like two companies came together to do a Kickstarter. They both blame the other for stealing the money. And now either neither of them or both of them are going to release the game.
Are you able to say who? Or is this like inside
it's
hot
like,
goss from the developer?
I would have to essentially keep explaining things to you in order for it to make sense. It's not that interesting, unfortunately.
Okay.
Wasn't there a case where like the Pinkertons, like the actual organization, got really mad at Rockstar?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Magic the Gathering, but never mind.
They get mad at everybody. I don't know about the Magic the Gathering one. I know you're in the Magic world. But
that was just like a thing where there was a bunch of Magic cards that were stolen. So Hasbro / Wizard of the Coast sent actual, factual, literal Pinkertons after people to like figure out who stole these cards.
No, what I'm thinking of is that like the Pinkertons like sued Rockstar for defamation for like the way they were portrayed in the Red Dead Redemption games.
That would be funny.
That's very funny.
I mean, there were the guys that they brought to beat up like unionized, like proto-unionized people.
Did strike
like
busting and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
This is facts. Like,
yeah, it's definitely real.
This is 24. We want to inconvenience ourselves with facts anymore. They're really annoying.
Yeah, you could say we're post facto, I guess.
Yes. But Frank, I feel like you should have some examples of this here.
I mean, I also feel like I should have some examples of this, but I
think about the Nintendo Entertainment System. What about Tengen? What about Thingy Dreams?
Well, I mean, I guess there's some fun stuff there. Like I don't have it on me, but we have this flyer that Nintendo passed out. I think at CES. We're not exactly sure, and it's Mario. Like circa 1989 Super Mario, shaking hands with like a Russian guy in like a war coat and like the hat and stuff. Like they're teaming up, like Soviet era Russia stuff. And it was a flyer. Basically, I think all of us know, at least in vague terms, the whole Tetris licensing drama that happened around then. It is a flyer that is celebrating the fact that Nintendo and only Nintendo has the license to Tetris and go to hell Atari, basically. They don't name Atari, but they commissioned this like kind of beautiful painting, and they printed out this flyer and they handed it out to everyone. And the only purpose of this flyer is to say that we beat Atari at licensing this thing.
There was only a brief window in which anyone would care about that.
Right.
As well. Atari didn't last long. But Atari does have a lot of weird ones. Like, I forget if I've told this whole story before, but everyone's best friend, Tommy Tallarico.
Oh, our buddy.
Told me that he discovered. So when Tommy Tallarico took over and like got the Intellivision company, he found that Atari had been using some of their games, some Intellivision games, Intellivision versions of games, without having paid for it, with no licensing fees and stuff. And so he did like a deal with them that not only paid him some money, but also he wound up taking ownership of a couple of Atari properties. And that happened for quite some time. But then Intellivision was selling off all their assets because of the Amico fiasco that they did.
Right.
Yeah, because of Tommy. And so who bought all the Intellivision assets and thus their own video games back is the new owners of Atari. And so it just all like looped back around. I think that's kind of good. Interesting and weird.
All right. I got one more question here. This requires some explanation for Chris Remo, I guess. On this show, we have this recurring segment where we compare video games to movies or other things in popular culture, all spinning off of the question of what is the Citizen Kane of video games?
Classic question.
The most recurring permutation of that we have on this show is, what is the Day the Clown Cried of video games?
God.
I feel like I have to address the fact that...
Some people have seen that now.
TCM just released a documentary about the making of The Day the Clown Cried. So I have to ask, what is the TCM documentary about the making of The Day the Clown Cried of video games?
Oh, jeez.
All right. Okay. Is it the Tetris movie? Maybe it's not the Tetris movie because Tetris came out.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be a documentary about a video game failure.
Well, I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me is the version of Duke Nukem Forever that came out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty good.
So, like it's not the original game. It probably uses a lot of the original design and stuff. But, I believe it was Gearbox, right?
Yeah, I think, Gearbox ultimately.
Among others,
I believe it's basically Gearbox, like...
They're the last ones holding the hot potato.
Like an historical recreation of, like, the bare bones work that was in the original, I think. So it's almost a documentary in that it's exploring and recreating something that no one had seen.
Oh, I have the actual factual answer.
Oh, I think I have the actual factual answer. So let's see if you have...
So let's
see if you have the one I do.
All the things that Valve have done the last couple weeks about Half-Life and its 20th anniversary and all the shit about Half-Life 3 and that shit. Like, that is literally documentaries about this game that's hotly anticipated, that has never come out, and all the reasons why it hasn't.
My objection to that is The Day the Clown Cried was never hotly anticipated.
So,
fair enough.
By some. I mean, people were certainly paying attention to it. We wouldn't know about it if it weren't.
France, maybe?
Yeah. They love that guy over there.
Oh, Brandon, what's your answer?
Oh, mine was going to be a flavor of what Ash just said, where it's either that official stuff or it's the constant, the data mining videos that like Chris Remo was talking about, where people are delving into Half-Life to try to get little morsels, because that's what people have been trying to do with The Day the Clown Cried for ages, is be like, what is it actually? What really is in there? What's real? What's fantasy? What was intended, etc. So, I think it's somewhere in that zone.
All right,
Jaffe, what were you going to say?
I want to hear what Chris was going to say if Chris has any thoughts.
I have no answer for this. But the thing I was going to say is I like the idea of introducing like sort of SIGGRAPH demos and E3 demos as a possible kind of area to mine for this. I just don't have a great example.
Oh, yes. I will share that classically our answer to what is The Day the Clown Cried of video games is Peter Molyneux's Project Milo.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I have a friend who worked on that.
Oh, really? Oh, what can you tell us about it?
We get them on the show.
I think it was one of the first things he worked on in the industry. He's actually Jay Benson, who was the animator on Firewatch, which is how I know him. And
I love that game.
Thank you. And he was new to the industry professionally, and I think he was sort of just like, I guess this is what this is like.
Video games are.
It's a strange man has, like
a strange man made a strange child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he animated Milo, I think.
Wow.
So for my answer to this, I looked through IMDb to find like documentaries that were made about notorious video games, because the thing that The Day the Clown Cried is notorious for, just aside from never coming out and starring Jerry Lewis, is the fact that it was literally about a clown in the Holocaust who just like Pied Pipers Jewish children to their deaths on behalf of the Nazis.
No.
So it was the most offensive story you could possibly think of.
Little more nuanced than that. But.
Yeah. So I found that in 2008, a documentary came out called Playing Columbine, which is a documentary about the making of the Super Columbine Massacre RPG that came out just purely for shock value. That is a game that came out, but I think it might be comparable.
Yeah, the fact that it came out makes it, and also was like, it was made for shock value, whereas The Day the Clown Cried was like...
in earnest.
Yeah, he was really trying to make something about the terrible feeling of trying to survive at the expense of other people. But I think what I learned from reading a thing that a guy who watched what exists of it, whatever that
it's a lot of degrees removed, but go on.
Yeah, sorry. A person finally got to watch what exists, 3 hours of footage or something like that. And it was more about the clown trying to bring a small amount of joy to these children, knowing that they were going to die, knowing that there was no saving them, still trying to bring them a little joy in their out of the misery, is what I understood to be the intention of it. But I think that just when you hear the various terms thrown together, it winds up sounding like he's Pied Pipering children to their death. Which
not great.
It wasn't what he was going for.
I think a lot of the spirit of it is not the movie of the question as I'm interpreting it, and like the interest in The Day the Clown Cried is just like, it's something unknowable that you kind of obsess over the idea of what could have been, what might be there, and in video game terms, I actually think it's the crazy obsession that even I've contributed to a little bit, that people have over like the original vision for Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And I think the answer would be like fan hacks. A fan hack of Sonic 2 that's like the ultimate edition. This is what they meant.
The ones that restore all the cut. That's a good one. All right. Yeah. With that, I think we're going to go on to our lightning round. This week, we're playing a game I call Burning Questions. We are going to answer just general questions that everybody's been asking as pithily as possible, just to put everybody's minds at ease before the new year.
Everybody.
These are very common questions.
Like what happens when we die?
That we are all going to find definitive answers to together.
Okay.
Question number 1: where's my water?
On the nightstand.
Yeah,
it's right here.
Yeah, there you go. Question 2: what's inside the cube?
Milo.
It was a scam.
Mm-hmm. Question 3. Where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego?
Oh, I know this one because I beat it. She was in Minot.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Nice.
Who shot Johnny Rock?
Who
shot Johnny Rock?
It was the lady, right? Wasn't it the lady with the red hat?
The lady on the cover, yeah.
Carmen Sandiego.
I think it was her. I think Carmen Sandiego did it in North Dakota.
Who stole Hanukkah?
The friggin' guy that you just talked about. Those guys. The guys.
The Hanukkah goblins.
Yeah, the Hanukkah goblins did
Romans. Roman soldiers.
It was actually the Greeks who stole Hanukkah.
That's
yeah. It's like you don't know anything about Roman history, Ash. I might have to teach you something after this. All right. Next question. What remains of Edith Finch?
Bones. Right? Or Ash?
Yeah, I think it is bones.
Literally a baby.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true.
Can I really be the hero?
No, you can be the guy, though.
I want to be the guy.
You can do your best.
Do you like horny bunnies?
No.
Yes.
I don't because, God, have you ever seen rabbits going at it? It's terrifying.
No?
Like, well, if you've had multiple rabbits.
You got to data mine the original Wii game to see that. But
that's right.
Yeah.
London is absolutely full of urban foxes, and they are the loudest, most distressing animals when they have sex. It honestly sounds... Yes, the foxes. It sounds like human babies being murdered. I'm not even
Well, yeah, because foxes are like hardware on cat software, and they just scream. They scream.
They do.
It's so funny.
They do scream.
Like rabbits, yeah.
Yeah, so horny foxes nobody likes.
No.
Question 9. What did I do to deserve this, my lord?
You were born.
Yeah, I can't deny that.
You data mined a rabbits game.
Born a penguin.
My last burning question. Ivy the kiwi?
Yes.
No.
Oh. Well, we're split.
Chris Remo, you're the tiebreaker.
Ivy the kiwi?
Science point, yes.
Oh, it's a yes. Okay.
It's
Nice.
a yes.
Nice.
Yes.
That's it. Yuji Naka's out of jail.
That's it. Brandon, you're the winner. Congratulations.
Nice.
You have received your 3rd credit. The score is Ash 3, Brandon 3, Frank 1. As a reminder of things you can do with these credits at any time, which have never been spent since I've implemented this system.
I only got the one.
Yeah, you can introduce your own question. You can change the terms of a question. You can extend the life of a question. For 4 credits, you can make all of us play a game. For 6 credits, we do a list episode of your choice. For 8, I think you host one. I think that's where we're at right now. But yeah, just increasing levels of homework, some for you, some for all of us. And we're all getting pretty nervous because we're getting close to 4 right now.
Yeah, someone's going to spend a credit.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to recommend to our audience and our listeners, both willing and unwilling? Just people who are trapped in the room with people who like to listen to this show, as most of the
Wow.
I was trying to figure out where this was going.
Yeah.
All the unwilling listeners.
What demands do you have to make to our unwilling listeners?
People in the car on the holiday drive.
That's what I'm thinking about. This isn't like a dungeon scenario. It's a car scenario.
Okay, well, you can't do anything about this in the... Actually, maybe you can these days on your handheld emulator devices or whatever. It's coming up on that Xmas. You're going to have probably about one Xmas.
What are you saying?
I'm saying Christmas is coming.
Oh, you're saying Xmas? Like what?
I'm saying Xmas.
Oh, it didn't sound like that.
What do you think I was saying?
Asmus?
Asmus?
Yeah, Merry Asmus.
Why would I say Asmus?
I swear to God, that's not like Ashley being horny again. That's what it literally sounded like you were saying. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't have anything to do with that particular holiday. Since Christmas, the reason for the season, is coming. You should play Christmas Nights.
Oh, of course.
Experience the first 3D Sonic the Hedgehog by unlocking presents and then unlocking Sonic, and you can run around as Sonic in the Christmas Nights world. It's fun. It's nice. It's cool to think about how Sega especially used to theme things around holidays. They loved doing it. They had like Halloween special stuff, New Year's Eve, Christmas, Valentine's Day. They would always put out a little something here or there, but Christmas Nights was the big one. And you should check it out because it's kind of nice.
In the same sense that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, Christmas Nights is a Sonic game.
That's right. That's right.
So this is something that maybe people forgot existed, but I didn't. And luckily it was on sale this year. I think people that listen to the show know that we recently got 2 new cats. They're still kittens. And I remember that Mario Kart Live was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I got that for our house. And Mario Kart Live with Curious Kittens is a really good time.
Oh, yeah. Baby.
Giant cats.
If that applies to your life, yes, you can drive around little Luigi honking at some giant dinosaur cats, and it's pretty good.
You got to try that with Boo.
You know you're gonna make me cry because I demoed that game when I still had Ein, and I used to run into him, and he would look at it like, "What the fuck is this? What are you doing?" And I would chase him around my apartment with the car. For that review, I actually role played and wrote a passage for Ein reviewing the game along with my husband's cat Gus, and they both hate it.
Oh, that seems right.
That's some cute shit.
Well, Corndog and Taffy are pretty into Luigi being their new friend.
Luigi's everybody's friend right now.
Yeah.
Wait, Mario Kart Live, it's not just Mario. You can have Luigi too?
There's a Luigi set.
Oh, that's neat. That's nice.
Yeah.
I would recommend that everybody stop what they're doing right now, go to Steam and purchase mouthwashing. I just discovered this game.
She will not stop talking about it, everyone.
I know.
Yeah.
This is just her thing now.
Incredible. It is an amazing game. I cannot believe that it is straight up and down a 2-hour game. You can finish it.
That's all I had to hear.
Game of the year.
You can finish it in an afternoon. It doesn't take long. It's not difficult. It's it's a survival horror game with minimal puzzle solving mechanics that aren't really that labor intensive at all. It is an incredible, heart-breaking narrative that demands that you play it at least twice. And you can do that, literally play it twice in an afternoon because it's only 2 hours long. It is probably my straight up and down game of the year, coming in at the buzzer. It is a perfect game. I'm just gonna fucking say it. It's a perfect game.
We'll figure that out in February. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to recommend to our listeners? Places they can check you out, places you are interested in.
I mean, you can check me out every day on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Chris Remo, and I solve crosswords and stuff. But other than that, I don't know. Most recent film I saw was The Brutalist, and I really liked it. It was both sort of grand and sincere, which is pretty, I would say, rare in film these days, and I appreciated that. And a great soundtrack.
I want to ask, what day of the crossword week is the best YouTube hang if you were only going to check you out once a week?
I don't know. I think if you're not necessarily interested in solving them, the Thursday one might be fun to watch because it usually has the wackiest theme. So if you just want to see what kind of weird stuff do people do with crossword grids, that might be a good one.
Check out the Thursday shows.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. I have got some recommendations that I would like to make. I would recommend that you please rate and review our show wherever and however you can. You could also support us directly with your donations on patreon.com/insertcredit. If you'd like to sponsor our show with an advertisement or personal message, or submit your own horrible buzzer, you can email me at show@insertcredit.com. You could also join our community at forums.insertcredit.com, or if you're not already, find us on youtube.com/insertcreditshow. Find Ash Parrish at The Verge, wishlist Demon School on Steam for those sweet school bells, and make your tax-deductible donations today to the Video Game History Foundation. This episode is edited by Esper Quinn, with music by Kurt Feldman, and our horrible buzzer this week is by JD. I'm Alex Jaffe.
I'm Frank Cifaldi.
I'm Ash Parrish.
I'm Brendan Sheffield.
I'm Chris Remo.
And your game has now been saved. This was episode 369, so
nice.
Very nice.